All right, folks. Today we are talking to Ray Alfalla. Born in Cuba and raised in the US, Ray is one of the most influential figures in the history of sim racing. In this episode, we're going to talk to Ray about how he first got started in racing, how those early NASCAR games turned into what became a professional sim racing career, and how he grew into pretty much a household name in sim racing. He's a four-time eNASCAR Coca-Cola Series champion, competing at the highest level for more than a decade with teams like Junior Motorsports, Slip Angle Motorsports, the Wood Brothers, Joe Gibbs Racing, and even Legacy Esports. We're also going to dive into Ray's impact beyond the sim, including something I don't think necessarily a lot of people knew, his role in training and mentoring one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time, in sim racing, and how he's adapted through multiple eras of iRacing physics changes and formats, and how the competition has evolved. He's also going to share a little bit of advice for young and upcoming sim racers, breaking down what it really takes now to survive and certainly thrive in the ultra competitive environment that esports has become. Few drivers have shaped this sport the way that he has. This is Ray Alfalla. Hope you enjoy. First of all, thank you for joining us tonight. This is going to hopefully be the first of a bunch of different episodes we do with folks who are probably not as qualified as you and not as highly decorated as you, but we appreciate you joining us. So let's just go ahead and dive into it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We can go ahead and dive into it and start with the beginning. I know you've been asked this before, but your background's a little bit different than a lot of NASCAR racers or sim racers in general, at least in the oval side of things. Born in Cuba, I think you moved when you were 6. Walk us through kind of what your childhood was like. Were you interested in racing, motorsports? I know sim racing was just probably coming about at that point. How did you get started?
Yeah, so my earliest memory was when I was just a toddler in Cuba. My parents basically tell me this story. I don't really remember it, but apparently I saw like boat racing or something on TV when I was 3 or 4, and I was just like glued to the TV. And they just they remember that because I usually wouldn't, as any little kid, you would just kind of scatter around and you wouldn't really pay attention too much for too long. But I was really, I guess, fascinated by competition and vehicles trying to go faster than the other vehicle. And we when we came to the U.S. In 1995, yeah, I was 6 years old, and pretty much immediately, I fell in love with diecasts and things like that. I didn't really know what NASCAR was. Obviously, my family, not into racing, didn't really know anything about it. And then, eventually, I guess from buying all the die casts and maybe even like playing video games and things like that, I came kind of to realize, okay, so this is actually like a thing that's on TV. And obviously back then, it's not like now where everybody has DVR and you can just easily like search for things.
Yeah.
You just pretty much tuned in to the TV. And so it was probably like 98 or so, 1998, when I watched the first few NASCAR races. And funny enough, I remember back in the day, we had a cable TV plan that had ESPN2, did not have ESPN. So I don't know why. That's just the way that it was. And they would this like sounds like the saddest thing, but they would have the pre-race on ESPN2. So I'd watch the pre-race. I'd watch the pre-race. I know that I wouldn't be able to watch the race, but I'd just watch the pre-race enough, and then the race would start, and I just wouldn't watch the race unless the race was like on ABC. So I watched like Talladega and things like that were on ABC, and then finally, like in 1999, I think we got a new cable provider or something. Or that was like basically the first season where I watched every race. Since the Daytona 500, and then pretty much since 1999, I've followed NASCAR religiously, like every single year. And
Yeah.
I mean, other forms of racing too, but obviously NASCAR was the first one.
Yeah, it's like the way we started watching kind of sounds pretty similar. I'm curious, like first diecast. What was do you remember the first diecast that you had?
Oh no way! I mean, it was probably this kind of ties into why I ran the number 2 for so many years, and I was a Rusty Wallace fan. And it's basically just because of my last name starting with an A. I was number 2 in the class in kindergarten. So they put a big old 2 on my desk first day of school, and that basically
Wow.
just became like my number. So I chose number 2 in NASCAR and in other sports and whatever. So it was probably like a number 2 Rusty Wallace diecast from like the the mid '90s or something, but I don't remember specifically which one.
Yeah, that was my next question is like who your favorite driver was, but now the stars are kind of lining. It
Yeah.
makes sense. We all like, yeah, I feel like we all have like it's kind of strange reasons why we pick our favorite drivers if we're starting watching young. I was a Sterling Marlin fan when I started watching,
Okay.
and I just thought it was a cool paint scheme, the silver bullet, right? Obviously, I
Yeah.
wasn't
Okay.
pounding Coors Light as a 11-year-old. I
Yeah.
thought it was a cool looking car, and he was kind of a cool guy. So
Yeah. The rival beer brands there.
yeah, yep. Battle of the beer wagons. Those were the days. So did you ever like think as you were watching, I'd imagine you tuning into the pre-race on ESPN2, did you ever imagine like that you would, get a chance at, a real race car? We'll talk about that in 2022, but was that something like that you actually, actively wanted to do?
I mean, I would say not in any sort of like way of like seeing something on TV and then maybe I'll be that someday. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember my parents they had this maybe accurate uh, c- uh, they would tell me that oh those racing drivers are all like crazy, like they're just like they're out of their minds, but it
Yeah.
was like they would say it almost as if it was an actual clinical condition. Like I thought like the people I was watching on TV, there was like actually something wrong with
It's
them
in the
for
DSM, right?
for doing it. They're all crazy, they're all crazy, they just they crash and then sometimes like they get hurt or they die or whatever, and it's just like so not that that turned me off of that, but it was one of those things where it clearly wasn't something like, oh, look at this on TV. Hey, mom and dad, maybe someday I'll do this. It was just kind of like, well, maybe when I'm older or whatever. But it wasn't like if you were watching baseball and it's like, oh, I'll just get like a bat and a ball and maybe I'll make it to the majors someday.
Yeah, my dad always made the joke. He'd like give me a hard time. Go karting or anything like that was never an option, but he would joke with me like, "Hey, you're actually adopted. You're Jeff Gordon's biological son. Sorry you missed out on that."
Yeah.
So let's talk about sim racing. When you first got into it, I would imagine you were 10, 11, or a little bit younger. Was that on console, PC? How did you get started in that arena?
Yeah. So I think sometime in the late '90s, I remember I got NASCAR '98 for the original PlayStation, so I played that. But I think around that same time, I actually got the original NASCAR Racing by Papyrus, around, which I actually still have that CD somewhere um, on the computer. And I had like that NASCAR game. I had like NASCAR 2, and then NASCAR 1999, and then by the time like NASCAR 4 came out, it
Mm.
was too advanced for my computer, so I didn't play again until we got like a computer upgrade in 2003. So I skipped out completely on NASCAR 4 and NASCAR 2002. So I was playing console games all along. I mean, so like I had NASCAR 2000, NASCAR 2001, then the EA games. So I was, completely. That's all I would pretty much play for video games wise. It was all just like sports stuff. I always sucked at anything else. If it
Yeah,
was like
same
a
here.
shooter or if it was like I didn't want to play a game that would make me like uh anxious or nervous, except for like competition in a game. So I wouldn't find it interesting to like load up some sort of shooter game or something and have to be like hiding and simulating war. For me that was just like I'd rather just be simulating hitting a home run in the World Series, playing the MLB games or football or Madden but it was mostly racing. I mean, racing has always been like my number one thing.
Yeah,
And that's pretty much how I started. I mean, that's I guess my start in sim racing, and then eventually, obviously, it got to NASCAR 2003 when we got broadband internet, and I got NASCAR 2003. Um, and I mean, obviously, that was 22 years ago, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, you're making me feel old. I think we're
Yeah.
born, we're the same age. We're both born in '89, and that's like
Okay.
I can't believe it's 22. I was looking at something yesterday, and I was like, this is 25 years old, and it feels like it was just yesterday. Like it
Yeah.
literally just yesterday. So were you doing a steering wheel back then? Like when did you advance? Were you steering wheel on NASCAR '99 or?
So I actually had one of those like Walmart steering wheels that I mounted on some sort of like small desk for one of the console games. I forget which one it was. It was around the year 2000 or 2001, but the wheel was so bad it was literally just better to use the controller. Um, so I didn't. So yeah, all the console games were always with controllers, and then when I got to the computer, when I first got NASCAR 2003, or well, all the Papyrus games, I used the keyboard till NASCAR 2003 when I actually got online. And I remember, NASCAR 2003 had like all these settings to make it easier on people with keyboards. So it would just basically dumb down the keystrokes and things like that. But it would kind of make it to where if you were driving, say, at like Daytona, it would just it would kind of force you around like the optimal line, and you had to really you would have to hit the left. Like, for example, off of turn 2 at Daytona, it would just kind of take you out towards the wall. And if you wanted to stay by the yellow line, you had to like really smash the keys a lot of times to kind of like go against whatever it was trying to tell you to go. And then I would see people with steering wheels and things like that be able to just like take their car anywhere they wanted. It was like, wow, that must be amazing. Like to be actually able to just steer your
Yeah.
car without any. So I remember for Christmas in 2003, I finally got my first wheel, which was it was a Thrustmaster. Um, Thrustmaster something 2. I forget what it was. But yeah, that was a total game changer when I got that. It was like, oh wow, I can actually like drive the car, and I remember first thing I did was I took off all the driving aids like completely. I was just like, I want to be out here and just like experience what it's actually like to, because it was all until then it was just every driving aid possible would be on the car because you were using a keyboard. Um, so I remember at first I was like, well, maybe I should leave like traction control on. Nah, let me just take this all out. Just let me just
Yep.
get used to driving like this, and that's pretty much where I went from there.
You haven't lived until you've driven with a Microsoft Sidewinder joystick on some of those
Oh
games.
man,
That me and my buddy,
yeah.
we were joystick users. Like my dad used to play the Air Warrior flight simulators and stuff, so that's what we had. So it wasn't as bad as you might think. I think
Well,
it's
there's a
probably better than a keyboard.
very successful sim racer named Brad Davies that used
Yes,
a joystick even in the Coke Series and won races. So actually,
that
I don't know if he won races. Eventually, he moved to a wheel, but he was extremely successful on 2K3 with a joystick.
yeah, I think I was doing NASCAR sim racing with the EA game on
Mhm.
PC. I don't know if you remember that one, but
Yeah, that disaster of a.
weirdly enough,
That
that
was.
was my first league. But I think I was
Oh my
probably
god.
like 13 or 14. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, but
No,
I
I
was
remember.
joystick.
Yeah, so at that point, it came out in 05. And I remember at that point, like 2K3 was already discontinued, so we were playing 2K3 for a couple of years, and then this new rumor of because the EA has
Oh
the
yeah,
NASCAR
it's
license.
gonna be awesome.
I remember there was like screenshots came out and things like that, and I remember being so excited for this thing. And then when they released like a demo first, and I downloaded that demo, and I remember loading it up. Now I'm used to 2K3 where everything's just like polished and it just
Hmm.
looks nice. And then I remember loading that demo and I was just like, this game has to be like not finished at all. Like this has to be something is missing. It looks terrible. It doesn't drive well. Like the whole thing was like the worst experience I've ever had in any game, like ever. It was like NASCAR '98 was better. It was basically
Yeah,
like that. And sure enough, like no, the demo was just like one track. It was like Daytona or something. But the actual game that was released sometime after that was like that. It
yeah,
wasn't like
yeah,
it wasn't unfinished. That's just how the game was, and
yeah.
it was like the biggest disappointment. So we all just went back to 2K3, and yeah.
Yeah, I remember it didn't like the I guess the newness wore off pretty fast. I remember the biggest thing for me, I felt like the car feel was very much different from NASCAR 2003, Whereas I felt you might have felt differently. I always felt like '03 was a very kind of light. The car always felt light to me compared to like NASCAR sim racing, where it felt more glued down to the track. Maybe I don't know. It was two
Yeah,
different physics models.
I don't even remember what it drove like. I'm not even sure if I ever like did any serious. I don't really remember like the. I think there was some sort of like issue with the computer running the game, or there was
Yes.
something to where the effect of like I can't sit here and say that I actually even remember what it drove like, honestly.
Yeah, that's it's. I think we're all glad to probably forget about it. So I'm assuming it's not long after that you might have gotten invited to an invitational series from Dale Earnhardt Jr. or that Dale Earnhardt Jr. was running. Talk a little more about that.
Right. So basically, I'm just gonna backtrack a little bit. So I started playing 2K3, and at that point, I was only playing like I was playing in the open Sierra lobbies, open Speedway, which was like the most famous server back in the day, and they used to run like a loop of like Daytona, Talladega. It was just over and over, and I mean, but I kind of made friends there, and then I kind of got I don't want to say too good, but like I was qualifying on pole most of the time, and I kind of figured out how to qualify, and I had a few friends that really taught me how to qualify well and things like that. Long story short, they banned me basically because they accused me of cheating.
Oh, the grip
Um,
packs.
and that wasn't the first time that had happened. I mean, I joined a couple other leagues, and some of those leagues basically told me like, "Hey, we like you, but you can't come back because like you're just too competitive or whatever." Um, so I remember, so like late in 2005. Basically a whole bunch of people got together, people that have been banned from other leagues, and said, "Why don't we just make our own league?" And it's just going to include everybody who's apparently just too good for every other league. And this was called ASCORS, the American Stock Car Auto Racing Series, or something like that. Yeah. And so that league basically was created for the 2006 season. And in that league, it became like pretty popular pretty quickly because it was super competitive. It had trucks and Bush, Cup, and Dale Jr.'s DMP League, which had been running since like '03, '04, '05, had a lot of high profile drivers. Like I mentioned, Brad Davies. You
Joystick
had
guy.
drivers like, yeah, you had drivers like Kevin King, John Prather, those guys who started racing in the ASCORS races. And so basically that was like the first time that we ever got to compete against these guys that were like top of the, top of the top, racing against Dale Jr. and things like that. So we made friends with a lot of those guys. And then I remember May of 2006, Kevin King basically asked if I wanted to race the Bush series in DMP, and I accepted that. And basically that was kind of like my way in. And then eventually, um, I performed well there in the first few races that I did, and I got invited to the Cup Series there like mid 2006, and that's kind of where I met all these guys. Where towards the end of '06, I was racing in a server with like Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex and Brad Keselowski and Dale Jr. And it was just kind of like a weekly thing where it was the weirdest thing because we were doing this and we knew it was them, but it's not like you could tell anybody. Like nobody even knew what this was. Uh, if you just told somebody, "Oh yeah, I just raced like Dale Jr. like last night on my computer," they would just be like, "Nah, you're racing like some computer or something. It's
Yeah.
not really them." But we all knew it was, but it's just not like now where everybody knows what iRacing is. Everybody knows. Back then, I remember, the famous line of Dale Jr. telling Truex about Talladega BR in the Cup race, and like everybody's so confused about what he meant, but like every sim racer knew exactly what he meant.
Yep.
you know
Yeah. So, what was like inside those races? Voice chat? Like, were those guys communicative? Did you like talk to them during the races and kind of, during the week? What was the relationship like there, if there was any?
I don't really remember. It wasn't like iRacing. Like we didn't, 2K3 didn't have like a server voice chat, so you would
Yeah.
have to be like in
Team speak.
back then it was like, yeah, it was like TeamSpeak or
Uh,
even like Ventrilo and things like
oh
that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's way back. Um, but really, most of the time that I ever got to talk to Dale and even Denny and things like that, it was mostly like just not even during the actual competitive races. It was like whenever they had servers up and we were all just kind of like fooling around. We'd just kind of be in there. Everybody would just be kind of hanging out, and so that's how kind of we developed those relationships where it was like everybody just kind of knew who everybody was. Yeah. Even if you didn't interact with them that much, they just recognized the name. So whenever I met these guys in real life, I could go up to them and say, who I was, and they would just recognize me by my name,
Was it that run in that Busch series with Dale Jr. and Denny and Truex and all that? Was that what eventually led to your entry into iRacing? Came out 2010, is that right? And then they ran their 08, and then they ran their first pro series in 2010.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, basically, iRacing changed the whole game because iRacing was not invitational. It was all merit based, and obviously in DMP you had a lot of competitive drivers, but you also had drivers that were there because they were friends with those competitive drivers. And there was a lot of really good drivers that probably just missed out because they didn't know the right people. So DMP was very realistic in those in that sense, very real to real life, how real life is. But iRacing basically, it was just kind of leveled the playing field. So we all went in there, and it's weird because now people join iRacing and they have like the rookie experience and they're all racing with rookies, but we all went in there together. So I just went into iRacing racing against the exact same people I was racing against before, and we were all just rookies at the same time. And I remember when they announced the initial Pro Series in like January of 2009, which is when the Cup car came out. Because before that, we were all racing like late models, and the truck came out. That was a big deal, like late 2008. And then finally, when the Cup car came out, that thing was like a beast. It was just crazy to drive, and you'd gotten so used to going like kind of slow because it had a short track car, something like that. Suddenly you were doing 200 miles an hour again, but with like fancy iRacing graphics and things like that, and it was like totally different from 2K3 and things like that. So yeah, they announced the Pro Series in 2009. We ran the Pro Series, and then basically the top, however they did it back then, it was like top 50. Essentially made it into the first World Championship, now called the Coke Series. And that was in 2010, and ironically, Dale Jr. won that first race. But yeah, I mean, when they announced that, it was like we were racing for $10,000. It was like kind of unheard of, and I remember thinking like, wow, this is going to be like the top 43 drivers like ever in sim racing, and they're all going to be in the same server. And I couldn't quite wrap my head around the fact that like somebody had to finish last. All these drivers that were used to, all these drivers that were used to dominating other leagues and getting banned and things like that, and all everything that we went through for years before getting here, and now you're going to be all racing, all the top people, and yeah, I mean, I never really, I had hopes to be successful, but I never thought I'd be like nearly as successful as I was. And I remember that first year seeing Richard Thaler, who was kind of like a mentor to me for years before that. I remember seeing him up on stage, and like, nobody was surprised that Richard won the first championship, and I finished like 8th in points that year. And I was like super disappointed with my effort because I had just like a super inconsistent year, and I crashed a lot of things like that. And I remember just looking at him on stage going like, wow, I wish, I hope to be up there someday. Like, it'd be cool to, that's kind of like where my goal is. That's kind of like, I'm down here in Homestead every single year because I live in Florida anyway. So it'd be cool if I actually came down here with, a chance to win one of these championships.
So the first at least year or two unaffiliated, you're just racing on your own, not for a specific team, right? I know we've kind of shifted since then into kind of a different model.
Yeah. Basically from 2010 to 2018, essentially when I won all the championships. Yeah. Since the teams came in, I stopped winning. Not that it's correlated, but yeah, from 10 to 18, it was essentially, it was still organized. I mean, people still had teams. We and Junior Motorsports, for example, was in the, back then they were called the drill aisle. But essentially, they called themselves Junior Motorsports starting like in 2012. I think for like a couple years when Junior was like really involved in it. But yeah, nothing official like when it came to 2019 where it was actually backed by NASCAR and all the teams officially came in.
So 2011 was the first championship, correct?
Yeah.
So walk me through just overall how that season was, and specifically, I guess I'm curious, like, what was the NASCAR involvement in any of that? How much interaction did you have with iRacing? What was the process like just outside of being in the sim itself, I guess?
Well, it was just business as usual as far as iRacing goes. NASCAR wasn't, they weren't really involved too much in regards to the actual series until later. I'm sure they had input as far as what races
Yeah.
to run and things like that before the season with like the administration of the series. But there was no it wasn't like now where it was being like promoted on the internet and on social media and things like that. Um, so yeah, we all just had like our teams, our organized teams, and working on setups together and things like that. And we all just kind of went out there and raced. And and that first year was sloppy. I crashed a lot, and then 2011, I just kind of fixed that. Um, I just had a very consistent year. A lot of the other drivers around me kept crashing, and I wouldn't crash. I had good speed. I think I won 3 races that year, and it was a good year overall. But the biggest thing that I noticed from 2010 was I crashed a lot. I still finished 8th. So if I just kind of clean this up a little bit, I'll probably have a chance. And a lot of the really successful drivers from 2010 kind of took themselves out pretty early in 2011, just with crashes and things like that. And then pretty much like halfway through the year, it was only like 3 or 4 of us in actual contention. And back then there was no playoffs or anything, so it was just straight on. I think it was like one drop race or something. And then that was the year where the famous new tire model came out also. So we were all waiting on that. But I remember I was leading the points after the last race in the old tire model. Then the new tire model came in. That changed things up a bit. Junior Motorsports, aka Drill Oil, they kind of figured that out first, and they all like dominated. I remember that first race at Atlanta, they all dominated. They finished all like top 5 or 6. But I was like 7th or 8th, so I was just always close. And obviously, I had built a gap to where I think, we were able to clinch that one like a race early. We DNF'd like the second to last race, but we still came out and won the championship. So, and then the following season, I got formally invited to Junior Motorsports, and that was just an even better performance because there was just a lot better setups and things like that.
So I'm curious to hear about the Junior Motorsports experience, but I'm curious, like, what did you do to clean it up between 2010 and 2011 specifically? Like, what did you find? This might be helpful for folks watching this. What did you find that you were doing that was leading you to be involved in crashes, or be the catalyst of the crash?
Yeah, well, I think well, first of all, the big change in as far as hardware was that I got triple screens at the end of 2010. So I ran the last few races of 2010 on triple screens, which is probably the biggest upgrade, definitely back then, just because of the visibility. So I kind of realized this like pretty early. I was like, if I can just see more than other people, I probably will do well in traffic. Because back then, the cars didn't drive nearly as nice as they do now. The cars were just kind of all over the place in comparison to they were now. And also, the cars in general were just harder to drive because they had more power and things like that. And it was the COT, and it was like racing a space shuttle in comparison to what they have now. So yeah, so I would say that probably improved my chances a lot because I was probably on triple screens, and there was maybe a handful of people on triple screens, and everybody else was on single screen. So I was just a lot more confident than everybody else, in traffic and things like that. But as far as what my mentality, what changed was I was just more patient. When you're in the heat of the moment and you see that there's like 10 laps to go, if you're at a typical mile and a half, 30-second laps, that's 5 minutes. 5 minutes is actually like a pretty long time if you think about it. If you just sit there for 5 minutes, that's actually like a decent amount of time. But me as a rookie in 2010 would see like 10 laps to go, and I just kind of lose my mind, and then, or and I would just make a lot of mistakes late in races and things like that. So I just kind of figured, if I just kind of be more patient and not overstep my boundaries and just kind of bring it home and finish races, the points will come. And so I think all that joined together with having more visibility than most drivers, and then just having an extra year of patience, helped me just kind of navigate through that season.
So, tire model. You mentioned the new tire model. I know this was the one I think you're speaking of that kind of changed it from just flat out to being more focused on kind of managing your tires. That's the one that happened in 2011.
Well, no, the tire model now has been through so many iterations where I think they're on like version 10.
Yeah.
We're talking about, but this was, I think, the first time that an actual tire model was put on a car. So where before that it was just the original iRacing, called the old tire model, where the cars were just kind of drifting around. I mean, they were completely unrealistic to drive. And then this new tire model, um, made things more realistic. I mean, as far as we weren't drifting around the corners and things like that. And then, but as far as the tire management stuff, that was more like that came in, I would say, more after like 2020, 2021. It's more of a very recent thing that I've complained about, but not the original one. I mean, the original one, had its pros and cons, and then it just evolved over the years to, the cars have all like changed how they drove pretty much every single year since 2011.
Yeah, clearly that tire model, the first actual, I guess, slightly realistically, modeled tire, worked out well for you, right? Because your 3 championships happened after the three of the four happened after it, right?
Yeah, well, even the first one was
That
because it
2011.
came in halfway through that year, yeah. But
Um,
there was a lot of improvements, I would say, in 2012 compared to 2011 on that tire model, and it kind of stayed consistent, I would say, through about 2019. And then in 2020, things changed for the worse, in my opinion, and it's just kind of, um, a lot of things changed after 2020. Especially with NASCAR and the reduction of horsepower, and then the next gen coming out. So there's been just a lot of massive changes that you can't necessarily pinpoint one thing to tire model. But I would say up until like 2018 was more like status quo, where it's like big power, a tire that you could push and things like that. And then 2019, you still had a pretty good tire, but they cut the power. So it just completely changed the racing. And then it just kind of, it's become a lot more, uh, I would say there was a few years there with the low power. There was a lot of randomness in the races, a lot of pack racing, a lot of crashing, a lot of things like that. And even, up until very recently, when like Steven Wilson has figured it out, and he's just kind of kicked everybody's ass. But if you look at the average finishes of most of the field nowadays compared to 10 years ago, it's way higher for everyone because there's just a lot more, parity, a lot more competition, a lot more crashing than there's ever been before.
yeah, I've noticed that as well. It does seem to have changed dramatically. I feel like I'll turn on one of these Coke Series races, and I'm kind of surprised at some of the things I see happen. In terms, not that anyone's a bad driver, but I feel like that's kind of indicative of the sport, the real sport, right? Outside of
Yeah,
sim racing,
I mean,
just
there's just been a lot, like now, for example, even with the next gen, there's a lot of tracks where you can go almost wide open around, and you would have never dreamed of doing this 10
yeah,
years ago. You just couldn't. A mile and a half was, you were hitting the brakes into the corners. You had to drive it from lap one. You had to really be focused. And now, um, there's a lot of good drivers, and then the car itself, I would say overall it's easier. I mean, there's things about the car that are more difficult than they used to be, but in general, the field is just a lot closer together. To where in the past, if you made a mistake, the field was spread out enough to where you could be running in the top 5, you make a little bit of a mistake and you drop to 10th. But now, if you make a little mistake or you have any sort of contact in traffic, you'll just drop to straight to 30th, and then it's almost impossible to make passes and things like that. So the races are also shorter now, which puts drivers
Yes.
they're all desperate. They're all and we've been asking for longer races, and I think they had like a longer race this year. And it produced some of the best racing. And the thing is, the shorter races, because they have more crashes, they take just as long. So
Yeah.
they're not really. And I know it's because of maybe they think that people will tune off if the races are too long. But if you have short races and people keep crashing, people are going to tune off anyway, because
Correct.
nobody's going to tune into an online race just to watch people pacing around. So um, I think that's something that they can definitely improve. And then as far as the car goes, I mean, there's been um, the cars just drive totally different. I mean, from what they used to 10 years ago, and even in real life, you'll see the races are just different, and the way the cars drive is completely different. So it's just the series feels completely. It just feels like a completely different series to what it used to be.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Like, we can talk about how things have dramatically changed, I would suppose, in the past 10 years or so. Like, talk to me. Your first official team was Junior Motorsports. This is when teams started becoming a bigger thing. What's it been like to actually work with different teams? What's the actual involvement? You went from Junior Motorsports to Slip Angle to Wood Brothers, JGR, and then most recently, I'm trying to remember the name, Legacy Esports. So, what's it been like? How much have things changed through the process of working with bigger teams, including real life NASCAR teams? Um, how much involvement is there from those organizations when it comes to supporting you and what they expect from you as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's so the original Junior Motorsports, that's pretty much just a group of drivers. It
Yeah.
wasn't like an official it wasn't an official name from there was no corporate involvement there. Slip Angle again was more just friends. We formed a team and we made that. And then when the NASCAR teams all came in 2019 with Wood Brothers, yeah, there was communication as far as sponsorship and things like that. But they pretty much let us do our own thing. Same with Gibbs. I mean, Gibbs did help out financially with the late model deal that I did, so that was cool. And then Legacy was more of the behind the scenes team helping me when I was at Gibbs, and also in recent years. So there's just different levels of involvement, but most of the involvement from the real life teams are um, due to like sponsorship and exposure on social media and things like that. But when it comes to actually working with other drivers, a lot of it is just the same. The drivers will work with their friends and things like that, or people you get to know behind the scenes, and then a lot of drivers will work together, but then they'll be in different teams. So it can be a little confusing in those regards.
Um, what has it been like in terms of NASCAR involvement? Yeah, I think we had kind of gotten into just how the series has changed over time. How has NASCAR's involvement kind of changed? How has that impacted drivers? Has that been a positive thing in your mind? Is that, I know some negative changes we've talked about, but exposure has massively changed, right? Especially in more recent years for yourself and others. What I guess my question would be, you know, what's the coolest thing you've done involving NASCAR and their involvement in the Coke series specifically?
Yeah, I would probably say the couple media days that I was able to do. 2020, we had our first media day. Um, that's when they really so NASCAR all came in 2019, and then 2020 they upped the ante to 100 grand for the
Yeah.
champion. It was just kind of like insane. And they did this big media day. So it was really cool. We all took professional pictures and did all sorts of photo ops, and we were holding up like Coke bottles and things like that. And it was just like it was the first time the entire series has all like basically been there in person. Um, it's the first time a lot of us even like met, you know, because we live so far apart. So, and then I was able to do that again in 2024. So those were probably the coolest things that we've done. And then obviously, you know, I've been able to be a part of the championship weekend, and be able to do the whole thing. You know, get up on stage and you know, hold up the check and things like that, and all the, you know, the NASCAR dinners and things like that they do. When you're at championship weekend and things like that. So there's been a lot of really cool things and a lot of things that obviously NASCAR has improved. And NASCAR and iRacing have both worked together to improve the exposure of sim racing. And then of course, I mean, we, you know, ironically received a big help because of the COVID year. You know, the COVID year with the Pro Invitational Series and stuff, and then basically put iRacing on the world stage. And that really, you know, I think a lot of those numbers have just kind of like come down now because a lot of people joined iRacing thinking that it was just going to be like everybody's going to win $100,000, you know, like. And then it was like
a professional streamer.
Yeah,
iRacer,
okay, it's actually a lot harder than maybe, you know, the console games and things like that. So, but now what it's changed is that everybody knows what iRacing is now. There is no, if you talk about iRacing on TV and things like that, it's basically just, yeah, everybody knows what it is. Everybody does it. All the, you know, the real life drivers, they have their official manufacturer sim, but they also have the simulator at home. And if for whatever reason they don't get sim time because it's really expensive, they can just go home and do a whole bunch of laps on iRacing, and they talk about it all the time. So, yeah, and I think, you know, that kind of connects with drivers getting, you know, there's a lot of drivers that have gotten real world opportunities, or it's helped them kind of dip their feet into a lot of short track racing and things like that. And I mean, we see, you know, Josh Berry racing in Cup, and he was in the original Coke series in 2010. So, yeah, I mean, it's the real life and the sim world have kind of they've meshed together and they've intertwined a lot more over the years.
Yep, and you're a great example of that. 2022, you got the opportunity to drive was it limited late model?
Yeah, it was a limited model, correct.
So walk me through how that whole deal came together. Did you approach them? Did they approach you? And kind of what did it look like getting in that car, I guess? What did it take to make it happen?
Yeah, so basically, I knew, so it all went basically through Landon Huffman, who's a short track racer out of Hickory, and he used to race in the Coke Series like in 2014. So, you know, he's an accomplished iRacer and things like that, and I had heard that he was putting people in cars. You know, it was just kind of offering, you know, if you you paid a certain amount, you could get an opportunity. And obviously, in 2022, I was affiliated with Gibbs, so I asked them for some help and put, you know, an interstate logo on the car. Virtual Racing School also came on board and they helped out. And yeah, I mean, we were able to plan a a test in the summer, and then if that test went pretty well, which it did, then we planned to run a race in the fall. So, yeah, it was honestly it was an awesome experience. There's a lot of things that I would have changed knowing now, that I didn't know back then. It was mostly just car comfort is just the most important thing. And I learned that, especially the second race that I did. I actually did better the first race that I did than the second race that I did, because the second race that I did, they changed the seat, and they mounted the seat way too close to the pedals, basically, and I was just crammed in there, and I couldn't.
Did they not like test fit? Why?
They didn't,
did they
because
make the change?
I flew in on Friday and they put the seat in the car on Wednesday. So it was just like a logistical thing. And they asked for my height, but it was, you know, it's just kind of an approximation,
Estimate,
and we're talking about inches and things like that. And I mean, there's nothing the team did wrong. It just so happened that you know, I was super uncomfortable for that second race. But I mean, that first race though, even for the original test, you know, getting out there on the track, yeah, there's just so much happening And the biggest thing is everything is opposite from sim racing in the sense that in sim racing you have to have basically a really good imagination. In sim racing you have to turn your brain on. You have to absorb every sort of feedback that you can because there's a lack of feedback. All you have is like the force feedback in the wheel and things like that, but everything else you just kind of have to imagine it happening. You have to almost predict it happening. But when you get into a real race car, obviously you don't have to do that anymore. Everything's just already there, but you already have that sim brain where your brain is like going a million miles an hour and it's just absorbing way too many things at once, and you're just getting overloaded with all these sensory overload and things like that. And that's kind of the biggest challenge I would say for a sim racer is getting in the car and essentially having to numb down all your sensations that you're used to. You're used to having to focus so hard on feeling things, and suddenly you don't have to do that anymore, but you're not used to doing that anymore. So you have to the first few laps are always just going to be super overwhelming. Even that whole session was probably super overwhelming. But obviously there were moments in that session where I was able to just focus on the driving. And once you can actually forget about everything else that's happening in the car and you can actually focus on the driving, then it becomes, again, basically like sim racing.
So you're saying sim racing might be harder than real racing?
I mean, there's an argument to be made. There's a lot of real life drivers that struggle greatly in simulators because suddenly they have to imagine a lot of things. They don't just feel a lot of things. I mean, Kyle Larson has expressed many times how he goes by the seat of the pants. He likes just feeling the car. I mean, Jimmie Johnson, I worked with Jimmie for the Pro Invitational Series, and it was the same thing. Like, he couldn't feel the car because he's not sitting in it.
Can I pause on that? I'm curious to know more, about what you just said. You worked with Jimmie for the Pro Invitational back in 2020. How did that come about?
Right. So yeah, I know. I feel like we're just yeah, I know. That almost seems like the whole COVID year. It almost seems like it was just like a fever dream. So we saw that first Pro Invitational, and everybody saw Jimmie like really struggle that first race. He just kind of didn't seem to know, even like the procedures on the racetrack. He was having trouble like under yellow and things. Just didn't really know the sim, right? So I got in contact with Dale Jr. and I said, "Hey, can you get me in contact with Jimmie? I really like to just help him out." So he's like, "Sure." And then so Jimmie sends me a message, and I was like, "Hey, let's work on the following week." So basically, we just exchanged information, and we started. He came into the server, and basically all my friends from the Coke series were all in there with him, and we all just we all started like driving, and as I essentially worked as his crew chief for the rest of that Pro Invitational, which was, it was just the coolest thing. I mean, it was I remember he used to call me, and I'd be like delivering mail. And so I'd be like in front of my supervisor, and like Jimmie would be calling, and I'd have to like not answer the phone.
So no, I'm answering the phone.
No. It was just like, oh no, it's just Jimmie. It's no big deal. It's only like the 7-time Cup champion. Like it was kind of like crazy, and sometimes he would call me like in the middle of the day where I'd be at work, so I'd have him on speakerphone, and he'd be like doing something on the simulator or something, and I'd be like on there. It was crazy, and then I mean, and then the following year I worked with Kyle Busch, because Kyle was sponsoring the Coke Series car with Rowdy Energy, so I worked with him in the Pro Invitational. So, but I mean, by then it was like we had already kind of gotten used to working with all these guys, and I mean, we found out pretty much they're not too different from anybody else. They're just sitting there. They're drivers, they sit in front of a sim and they try as anybody else does. It's just that obviously they have so much real world experience that the sim doesn't come nearly as natural to them. In in the same way that if you put me in a cup car, I'd be like, "Whoa, what's going on?" You know, that's kind of like the same thing.
Were there any moments where you were like, I don't know how I can explain this any differently? Like something was not clicking, or you were like, this seems so obvious to me. As a teacher, this is what I'm thinking. I have this happen regularly where it's like, I don't know how I could explain this any differently. It makes so much sense to me, but I would imagine there had to be moments like that working with some of these guys. You don't have to drop names either, but
No, I mean it was a lot of the stuff. It was just a lack of general feel, you know. Um, it was, and I could just tell, like he knew, you know, for example, Jimmy, he obviously knew how to drive a car around the track and things like that. But it's like when it comes to those, you know, at the top levels of anything, you're talking a tenth or two, you know, and in real life, he would be able to know where that tenth or two is. Where like in the sim, he'd be a couple tenths off, but to him he wasn't a couple tenths off, and he couldn't really understand where to find that time. It was like, I mean, honestly, I've been there before, even
yeah.
after being in the sim for 20 years. It's like, where is that extra tenth? Where is that extra half tenth?
I do that all the
So
time. I'm like, there's no way this guy's actually running
right.
this lap. I don't know where they're picking up this tenth or two.
Yeah, so a lot of the time it's pretty much just them driving around the track, not really knowing where they're losing time because they can't feel anything in the car. Um, but everything else, you know, as far as how you drove around the track and things like that, all that stuff came very natural. It's not like you know, it wasn't like coaching an amateur or anything. It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, they know what they're doing. They're just sometimes missing that little bit of extra, you know, where like Denny Hamlin, he was out there dominating those races because he was a sim racer. He's been sim racing his whole life, so it was just natural to him.
So we got on a good sidetrack there.
Yeah.
I'm glad we went there. But I want to jump back to your run in this limited late model. You said you didn't do as well in your second race as you did your first race. There were some seating differences and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious. The very first time you went out there, how similar was it? I know there we mentioned kind of the feedback differences in terms of you're probably a lot more in tune with your body and what's happening with the car in sim racing because your mind is kind of predicting it, but it's already there for you in the real world. How much did you feel like your sim racing knowledge carried over, feel wise? Like if we were saying, iRacing, is it 1-to-1 when it comes to
I mean,
the cars
the
themselves?
actual the actual driving, I mean, it's very similar as far as it felt very natural. If the car got loose, I would correct the slide. All that stuff was I would do really without thinking about it. You can obviously everything happens very quickly. Um, it was more just even just the way you sit down. You know, when you sit in a real life car, you're strapped down and it's very difficult to move. You don't really see much out of the helmet. The mirror might as well not even be there.
Yeah.
Like the visibility is extremely low compared to real life or to compared to iRacing. And obviously in iRacing you just be in your boxers and you just sit on your sim and
Yep.
everything's perfect. You know, it's not hot. It's just perfect. Where in the car, I mean, you have all these vibrations. You have the G forces, which are like essentially it's just a big annoyance because you're going into the corner and you're trying to focus on like hitting your marks, but like it feels like your body's being ripped out of the right side window.
Yes.
So
I
you're like
remember.
fighting. You're strapped. It's the weirdest feeling because you're strapped in, so you know you're not really going anywhere, but somehow it feels like you're just gonna fall out of the seat. So the whole time you're just kind of you're trying to really fight all these physical effects while still focusing on the driving, and
Yes.
that's where like seat time comes into play. And all these drivers that have been doing this for years, they don't even think twice about it because they're just
Second
used to
nature.
it. Where somebody who's just starting out, you know, it's a completely different thing. And it just takes time. I mean, it just takes, you know, when they talk about seat time, I would say the biggest thing is just like getting used to just your body being in that environment. It's not even so much about the actual driving itself. It's about getting used to, um, you know, being in that restrictive environment where you have to really focus. Um, but there's a lot of things that are messing with your focus.
Is it going to happen again? You got anything in the works potentially to try to get in another real world race car?
I don't have anything in the works right now. I'm just trying to get back into the Coke series, which has been
That's hard to, yeah. It's
it's
easier
been a
said than
challenge.
done, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the real world stuff. The thing is, like, when I join something, I really want there to be kind of an end game to it. And obviously, being 36 now, it's not like I'm on anybody's radar, obviously, for any sort of like driver development things. I'm like 20 years late on that one. So, if I were to race, it'd just be to race like in the short tracks. There'd be no like actual, you can have. I mean, there's drivers that win races, multiple races every year, and they still don't even get a chance to
yeah.
advance. So it's not like anything's really going to come out of that. So where, like, in sim racing, there's like certain goals, and if I accomplish this, then I get that, and I accomplish this. Where, like, so I like competing. I like competing when there is like a chance of promotion, I guess you could say.
Yeah, the
Um,
one-offs aren't necessarily like it's cool once
right. I
or
mean,
twice, but
exactly, but
yeah.
it's just like if you spend this amount of money and then you get crashed or something like that,
Oh
and it's
gosh.
like, well, I just lost all that money and it just didn't seem worth it. So I mean, I'm not saying I'll never get back into a race
Yeah.
car, but it's not really the priority right now.
So what are you actively doing to get back into the next season of the Coke series? What does that look like? I know it's much different now than it was when you had your amazing run, and even just a couple of years ago. So what are you doing to make that happen?
Yeah. So right now, absolutely nothing, because basically, so I missed the cut for the 2025 season,
Mm,
and then they changed the system
yes.
to where there was no road to pro in 2025 to prepare for 2026. So essentially, there's going to be just one condensed series that starts in February of 26, and it'll go for a couple months, and then the Coke series will start in May. That's what they announced last year. So we're all kind of waiting to see um, what car and what tracks we're going to be racing for that. Uh, I believe they said it was going to be 11 races to kind of determine the field for the Coke
Would
series that
they
starts
like
in
do
May.
multiple different cars, or I would think
I
the
don't know.
next gen, but maybe
Yeah,
not.
it was the Xfinity car in the Contender Series,
Oh
so it
yeah,
wouldn't surprise me if it was the Xfinity car. But I guess now it'll be the O'Reilly car. But
yeah. That's gonna take some getting used to.
it's Bush.
Yeah, it'll always be the Bush
Yeah,
car.
the Bush car. Yeah. So we just don't know what it's gonna be. So it's been nice. I followed the Coke series. I pretty much watched every race. I
Is,
definitely was.
is
I
that
was.
hard?
Yeah, but unfortunately, I've now missed 2 of the last 3 years. I'm kind
That's
of
getting
used to it by
easier.
now. Um, and honestly, 2024 was such a bad season that it was almost better to not even. I mean, the races itself were miserable. So it's been a rough past 3 years, I'd say, on iRacing for me. Um, especially when you know I had really high standards at one point. I mean, I remember you know in that course of winning those championships, I would enter the season with the goal of finishing in the top 10 in every race. That was always like a goal of mine. And I remember in 2016, championship number 3, um, I finished top 10 in every race except for one. And it was because I got caught
Yeah.
uh, pitting, and there was a yellow, and I finished like 14th. That was my worst finish all year. Fast forward to 2024, I didn't finish in the top 10 once. So
Oh.
that's how much that's changed.
Well, that's not. Yeah, I was about to say that's not like just you. It's not you necessarily. It's just the cars changing, the formats are changing, and I think
I mean,
other people have an
it's
advantage who haven't been doing it as long as you, right? I think there's
yeah. I
something to be
mean, no,
said
for
for
sure.
easy to mold.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. There is absolutely there is the factor that it's a lot easier to learn something when there's nothing else in your mind already.
Yeah.
and it's extremely difficult to unlearn things. And then, which is, they talk about neuroplasticity all the time and everything, especially like after 25, it's more difficult to learn things. But it's like, it's not even that you can't learn things, it's that half the time, for example, when I'm driving the next gen, it's like half the lap I'm complaining about the car not driving like it used to drive, and then the other half, it's me actually trying to drive the car how it's supposed to be driven. Where like if you never drove 10 years ago, you
You're
never
not
knew what
complaining
that
about
was.
anything.
You're just, this is what the car is.
Yeah.
But I used to drive a car that I felt really comfortable with, that I really liked to drive, and now I'm driving a car that I don't really like to drive. So it's like, you're having to like unlearn certain things, which is just extremely difficult, especially when you talk about anything that has to do with coordination. A lot of that stuff is just baked in. Like you don't even think about the stuff. You don't even think about the things that you do. So suddenly, when something changes, I mean, you see the same thing with Jimmie Johnson in real life, where he's like
Yes.
struggling with the next gen and things like that, and he struggled towards the end of his career, especially when they cut the power, because like his whole career he got used to driving
On the edge.
these badass,
Yeah.
almost 1,000 horsepower cars. They required a different level of commitment and whatever. And then like towards the end of his career, he's driving these cars where they're going wide open around all these tracks
Yeah.
and everything's just different. And it's not that Jimmy can't do it, but Jimmy has to suddenly forget the previous 15 years.
Old
And
habits
it's
die
just
hard.
yeah, it's extremely difficult, which is why it's so impressive that guys like Denny Hamlin have been around for that long. Guys like Kevin Harvick, even Harvick struggled a bit towards the end, but he still like adjusted quite well. But I would say that's kind of the exception. I would say most drivers will they won't stay as competitive because the cars change, and especially the older you get. Like I don't feel, being 36. Everybody talks about your 30s is like your prime for driving. Like I don't feel like my reflexes are off. I feel like everything. We'll never know. Obviously, like I wish we could go back to what the cars were like when I was winning those championships and race those cars now to see what would happen. I would love to have like that social experiment, if you
Yeah.
will. Like if somehow we're driving the cars from like 2016 in the Coke Series in 2026, see where I would be.
Bet you'd be pretty good.
I mean, I know for a fact I'd be a lot better than I would be with the next gen, but how much, I don't know how much better. I mean, it's difficult. The field is a lot different. There's really good drivers that have come up through the ranks also. I'm not taking credit away from the drivers now that, like guys like Steven Wilson, Casey Kerwin. Those guys were not there 10 years ago. So obviously the competition has changed. With me is I still have the desire to compete. I still have the desire to go out there and win races. And for me, that's the most important thing. And at the end of the day, it's, I enjoy the competition. I still enjoy racing. I still enjoy NASCAR. So that's why I'm continuing to do it, knowing that it's going to be a challenge because of the car not driving, like I want it to drive. But I still want to do it. I still want to see if I can get back out there and perform. Knowing that now, I mean, excluding again, excluding Steven Wilson because he's been doing some incredible things. Most other drivers, um, the the average finish of the drivers is a lot higher. So it's like if you finish in the top 15 now in a Coke race, it's probably worth as much as the top 5 back in the day.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much variance and
Competitive.
so much randomness in these races now. And that kind of has to also change your expectations of where you rank.
You're gonna get there. I think you can do
I
it.
hope.
I believe in you. I believe in you. I know you'll have some fans. Like you said, you're the GOAT. Like people think about NASCAR, Coke
Appreciate it.
Series. That's like Ray Alfalla is the name that, I think most people probably are gonna recognize if they recognize any of them. So, um, Man, like I'm curious. I'm going to let you go here in a couple minutes. I appreciate you've already given us so much time. I'm curious with two last things. I'm curious about rivalries. I can't profess to watch every single Coke race for the past decade. Do you have guys that you have tended to race harder against, or maybe have found yourself at odds with, more often than most other folks out there?
I wouldn't say there's been anything, any long-lasting things. I mean, I remember back like when Ryan Luza came into the
Mm.
series, he was, I was having all that success, and he kind of came in there as like this new kid on the block, kind of like a Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon kind of
Yep.
situation, or Jeff Jimmy kind of situation. And I remember he won the championship his rookie year. And then in 2018, we both basically raced it out for the championship, and I was able to win that one over him in 2018. So I mean, the rivalry was more just like a competitive one.
Yeah, friendly.
More recently, uh, myself and Malik Ray would have been jawing on social media, you know, um, just random stuff. I mean, nothing crazy. Um, that I can imagine. A lot of that stuff is, I'd say, I mean, I get along with most of the drivers. I don't think I'm controversial. Um, on the track, I've definitely crashed people on purpose, no question.
Yeah,
Like,
as we
and
all
they
have.
know it, and they know it. So, um, but a lot of those guys I get along with before and after, and I mean, I've raced over 200 races now, and there's been, I feel like everybody's had beef with everybody at some point.
Sure.
But no, nothing that really sticks out as like any sort of like ongoing rivalry or ongoing like bad blood.
That's good. I figured that was going to be the case, but we had to ask. We have a lot of young drivers, who race in leagues that we broadcast and have raced in, leagues that we've operated in. And I'm curious if you had to give one piece of advice to a racer who was hoping to kind of, I don't think anyone's going to ever emulate what you've done, but to follow a similar path of making it to the Coke Series and racing, under the banner of a real NASCAR team, what would you tell those young drivers is the most important thing to keep in mind, or in terms of practice regimen, or any piece of advice, I suppose?
Well, I'll shamelessly plug virtual racing school, so
It's
you can
good.
get
It's
on
right.
there
Yeah,
and
I'll plug it as well.
yeah, I mean, I offer coaching there, and as far there's also a lot of other coaches as well, and weekly tutorials and things like that. But in those tutorials, I essentially say, um, you know, one of the things that helped me the most is just seeing what other people were doing. So if I join into a server, I don't just immediately get on the track and start doing laps without any sort of direction. I get on the track, I go to leaderboard, I see who's the fastest driver, I go on them. You can ride, in the cockpit, or even just look at them going around the track and just kind of see, okay, this is how they're driving. Um, and then you go out there on the track and you try to emulate what they do. So, and that's like, that's super important. You don't just like go out there on the track and see what happens. No, it's like every good driver has copied another good driver at some point. Every successful person at anything really started out being a nobody. And you start out and you basically copy whatever the good guys are doing. You would never, you would never go and see what the last place guy is doing. You might see what not to do, things like that. But obviously the most important thing is when you're in a practice session, find the fast drivers, get on the track with them if you can, but even if you can't, just like save the replay and study that thing. There's a lot of studying tape that you can do. When you run a race, if you make a mistake, it's very important to not immediately just like blame other people or other circumstances.
So easy.
Basically,
So easy though.
blame yourself. Like like Ken Schrader says, it's half your fault for being on the track anyway. but um, always look at replays of accidents that you've been in and try to figure out what caught yourself into that situation and what you could have done differently. And I guarantee you there is something that you could have done differently. It may have been 10 laps before. It may have been half a race before.
What
But you have
caused
to
you to
be
be in that spot?
extremely yeah, you have to be extremely critical of like everything that you do, and don't take it easy on yourself as far as like, well, I'll just cut myself some slack. No, it's like you don't cut yourself slack. You have to be extreme. You have to be your biggest critic. You have to be I mean, pretty much you have to be a perfectionist. If you're ever going to achieve anything close to perfection, you have to be trying to be perfect. That's pretty much it. Um, and it's okay to be disappointed with second, I mean, or third or whatever. Like you join a race. At least I join a race to win, right? Like
Yeah,
if
we all do.
I'm not saying I'm just like pissed off if I don't win the race, but that's the goal. That's the goal. And then if you don't win, you have to figure out why. And you always have to be super critical of yourself first. Um, and always just see what you could have done differently. Copy the best people. Try to do what they do, and you're gonna have to be very patient because this whole driving thing is like it can take you forever just to find half a tenth.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, well aware. Like I said, there'll be times where I'm out there and I feel like I'm just ripping it as fast as I can, and there'll be someone who is 2/10 faster. I'm like, I don't even know where you could. And of course, naturally, I get in and look at the replay and I watch what they did. So, and that is very good advice. Man, I'm gonna let you go. We're not gonna keep you anymore. I appreciate you taking just more time than you had to spend with us and agreeing to do this in the first place. Some rando messages you and you jumped at the opportunity, and I'm super grateful for that. So yeah, man, we'll be watching the Coke series that you're gonna be in. We're gonna speak it into existence. We'll be recruiting some fans to tune in and watch, and we'll look forward to watching you. So, any last words of wisdom or shout outs you want to give before we hit the stop recording button?
Yeah, well, I mean, just first of all, thank you. I mean, I enjoy doing these. I mean, anybody who wants to just have a conversation about racing in general, I mean, I'm always usually down unless I just have like some other things that I have going on. But like if I don't, I will answer to pretty much, if anybody wants to talk about racing or things like that, sure, I'm down. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you for my supporters over the years of people who have stuck by my side and helped me out, and have a lot of people to thank in my life over any successes that I've had. Um, and yeah, I mean, hopefully, we're not done. This was just a bad era of my career, and then we can just kind of turn the page and get after it in 2026.
And when that happens, you're gonna thank us. It was this
Yes,
that happened.
yes, 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 absolutely.
All right, Ray Alfalla, I'm gonna hit that stop recording button.